So like that, today I'll be focusing on what the numbers are telling us on our greenhouse gas projections 2023 to 2050. I'll be focusing on our national compliance and our compliance with our EU commitments. And then I'll hand over to our projections lead, Sam Modlin, and she'll take you through a more detailed sector analysis of the projections themselves. So like that, when it comes to our national greenhouse gas inventories and projections, the EPA has the lead statutory authority in terms of their compilation, but we work with a whole range of other government departments and public sector bodies in terms of their development. In some cases, they're key data providers. In other instances, they provide quite detailed modelling outputs that support the delivery of these projections. So as an example, the National Energy Management Framework, SAI, and the I3 model from the SRI, or the FAPI models from CHACISC. For our key messages this year, unfortunately, they're very similar to last year. So as Emer introduced, in terms of our 51% national commitment, at the moment we feel our projections are only showing a 29% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030. And to achieve that 29%, we'll require full implementation of the wide range of policies and plans that are outlined in governmental plans like the Climate Action Plan. Again, in terms of our sectoral emission ceilings and percentage reduction targets across almost all sectors, other than the commercial and public building sector and the other sector, which includes F-gases, waste and petroleum refinery, are projected to underperform relative to these ceilings and targets. And at present, all carbon budgets for the next out to 2030 and potentially up to 2035 will also be exceeded. In terms of our compliance with our EU targets, again, the 42% reduction by 2030, even if we apply the available flexibilities, we will also not meet that target. Throughout the next few slides, both Suzanne and I will be referring repeatedly to these two different projection scenarios. So the with existing measure scenario and the with additional measure scenario. So under the with existing measure scenarios, these typically relate to plans and policies and measures that have been committed to by government, where we have a high degree of confidence that they will be implemented. And in all instances, they must be in place in the last inventory year, which is in this year, for this year will be 2022. And their certainty is evidenced typically by legislation or by official government decision or by human or financial resources that are being already secured and committed for their implementation. On the other side, then, we have the more ambitious with additional measures. And these are effectively all our with existing measures plus more. And the more here comes from government plans, including the Climate Action Plan 2024. Like that, any of these additional plans must have a clear implementation pathway for us to be able to include them within our projections and to effectively model how they're going to impact our emissions out to 2030 and out to 2050. I'll outline in a later slide particular measures that are in the CAP24, but at present we would require more work or more engagement with our stakeholders to ensure that they're brought into our projections. So moving now onto our compliance with our national target of a 51% reduction by 2030 based on 2018 levels. Well, currently that orange line, as you can see, under the WEM, our projections are showing only an 11% reduction by 2030. Under the WAM, we will see a 29% reduction by 2030. So again, unfortunately, still a considerable gap to target there to the 51%. In terms of our carbon budgets, again, there are three. So the first carbon budget running from 21 to 25 of 295 million tonnes. A second budget from 26 to 30 of 200 million tonnes. And then our third budget, which is currently provisional, of 151 million tonnes from 31 to 35. And like that, we're not overly focused on that last carbon budget as yet, because there's still many plans and policies and measures that have yet to be in place to effectively comply with that budget. So our focus today will really be on budgets 1 and 2. And so when we take the budget for those first two carbon budgets in combination of 495 million tonnes, currently, as you can see from the orange line of the WAM, by 2030, we expect an exceedance, unfortunately, of at least 135 million tonnes under the WEM in the orange line. We're expecting exceedance of 135 million tonnes, or 27% above our carbon budget. Under the WAM, again, that contains the bulk of measures contained within the Climate Action Plan 2024. We're still projecting a 17% exceedance, or 86 million tonnes. Looking at our sectoral target assessments, and again, between this and our sectoral emission ceilings I'll be showing in the next slide, like the carbon budgets that have been defined effectively help us deliver that national target of a 51% reduction in 2030. This is the only second time that we've included these within the projections report itself. So just to aid interpretation, so looking at the electricity sector as an example, if you go to the rightmost column, you'll see in the top right corner that there's an emission reduction commitment there of 75% by 2030 versus 2018. At present, under our with additional measures scenario, we're projecting a 66% decrease by 2030. And then more broadly across all sectors, you can see it's only really the residential and commercial and public building sectors where they either meet or even exceed actually their emission reduction targets by 2030. We're looking at our sectoral ceiling assessment across both carbon budget periods of 2021 to 2025 and 26 to 30. Again, it's only the buildings, commercial and public, and the other sector that includes, again, F-gases, waste and petroleum refinery that meet their sectoral ceiling assessments. All other sectors under the with additional measures scenario are expected to exceed or breach those ceilings. Just to clarify, when it comes to this acronym, we'll be saying more often LULUCF, land use change and forestry. There currently is no ceiling associated with this particular sector, but based on the text presented in the Climate Action Plan 2024, it sounds like that they will be adopting the targets identified in the LULUCF regulation. So that sort of wraps up our summary of the national compliance. And as I mentioned, there are particular measures contained within the Climate Action Plan 2024, which as yet require further work to be brought into our projections. So as an example, under the avoid shift measures to achieve a 20% reduction in total vehicle kilometres, there's a particular fuel price increase there that again requires more work or more clarity on its pathway to delivery. In terms of agriculture and diversification, there's potential saving there of 1.5 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents, but again, it's not associated with a clear pathway to implementation, so it isn't currently within our projections. And then the same for embodied carbon. In addition to these measures, there's also 5.25 million tonnes of unallocated savings in the second budget period from 26 to 30 that at present have yet to have a clear policies or plans or measures associated with them. So even if we include those unallocated savings and if we include those particular measures that have yet to have that clear pathway for implementation, in total, these could provide up to 8.75 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent savings within CAP24 within this time period. And if we were to add these to our WAM projection of 29%, this could increase it up to 42% by 2030, so certainly closing the gap to that 51% target. But again, all of these measures, and including the unallocated savings, require additional policies, additional detail, and then additional policies measures with the unallocated savings for them to be brought into our projections. Now moving on to our EU compliance under the effort sharing regulation. So this is a 42% target by 2030 based on emission levels in 2005. Again, just to confirm that under the effort sharing regulation, these relate to our non-ETS emissions, or our non-emissions trading scheme emissions. So under the emissions trading scheme, this largely represents emissions from our larger industries and our energy providers. So the non-ETS emissions typically include or are dominated really by agriculture, transport, and then those building sectors. They make the majority of the non-ETS emissions. At present, under WEM, compared to the 42% reduction target, our projections are showing a 9% decrease by 2030. Under WAM, and again with the full implementation of the policies and measures, this could deliver up to 25% by 2030. And by 2030, we see, again, as just stated, the agriculture and transport will dominate emissions under ESR by 2030. And again, with the application of potential flexibilities available to us under both the emissions trading scheme and again LULUCF, even with the addition of those flexibilities, we will still not achieve that 42% reduction. So this slide sort of illustrates this point. So that grade line effectively communicates our budgets from 21 to 2030, we call annual emission allocations. So this is where we're trying to stay within to achieve that 42%. To make these sort of targets more fair and cost efficient and achievable, there are flexibilities available to us, which is the purple dotted line, the ETS flexibility, or the green dotted line there, the LULUCF flexibility, that ultimately increase our budget every single year to make those targets easier to meet. But even with those flexibility, if we look at a best case scenario with full implementation and the 25% reduction that we're going to get from WAM, we include the ETS and LULUCF flexibilities, that still only gives us, or we still end up exceeding that target by 17.7 million tonnes, above target by 2030. Under our worst case scenario, where we don't have that LULUCF flexibility, the plans and policies aren't fully implemented, and we go with our 9% when projection, well then potentially, unfortunately, that could be 61.2 million tonne exceedance over our national targets. So that concludes our summary of our compliance against our national and EU targets. I'd like to hand over now to Mary Frances, who can follow on with Suzanne on a more detailed sector analysis of our projections. Thank you.